Hello and welcome back to the channel, where it is time for the first episode in my third series of my first impression videos, with us taking a look this time around at 10 games from the original PlayStation that I have picked up within fairly recent times but have yet to invest any meaningful time into. Now, if you are completely new to these videos, what I do is I play through a game for around about 60 to 90 minutes that I've yet to really play through before I summarize what I think about it visually in terms of its sound, its gameplay, its content and lifespan, and ultimately whether it's a game I'm going to come back to and play more of in the future before I award it a final grade. Today's game is an RPG, the Granstream Saga, that originally saw release in Japan towards the end of 1997 before coming out in the North American region in June of 1998, but not getting a PAL release until right at the end of February of 1999. So in regards to the story, I'm going to try and shorten it as much as I possibly can. You take on the role of the character known as Eon, who has been unwittingly challenged with saving all 4 continents of the world known as Granstream from sinking into the sea below and ultimately destroying everybody on them. The beginning of the game sees Eon and his carer Valos slicing away chunks of the continent shelf that they live on to make it lighter and slow down its descent into the world below. But ultimately, as they run out of magic stones, they realize that another solution must be reached in order to save all of the worlds from being destroyed.
A great war devastated the land. After years of skirmishes, 2 opposing forces clashed in a final confrontation.
So once the main menu comes around, you'll see you've got a choice of load game, new game, and key configuration. It is worth pointing out that even though the Granstream Saga came out after the dual analog controller for the PlayStation, it does not support that, and you can only use a D-pad to control your character. So like always, I'm going to start with visuals first, and I feel you have to approach Granstream Saga with a few things in mind. First of all, it is one of the very first fully 3D RPGs ever made. Most of the RPGs at this point in time had either 2-dimensional characters with 3D backdrops, 2-dimensional characters with 2-dimensional backdrops, or 3D characters with 2-dimensional backdrops. So there wasn't really anything like Granstream Saga at this point in time. So in that regard, it's actually very adventurous. But of course, the actual quality of the visuals isn't particularly high in my opinion. And one thing that you will notice almost straight away is the fact that the character models basically have no facial details whatsoever within the game, and it is actually a little bit creepy in all fairness, but it also takes away from some of the character that you might expect the characters within the game to have. Yes, they do have faces within the animated video sequences. Yes, they do sometimes when you see their faces within the dialogue sequences within the game, but in general, it's just a little bit off-putting, and it actually gives the characters quite a low quality representation. In terms of the actual environments that you go through, I think they all look okay. They look pretty functional for a 1997 PlayStation game, but at the same time, there's nothing here that really wows me and makes me think, wow, this was really good for the time period it came out. Take into account it didn't come out in America until mid-1998, and by then we'd seen much better games, and also take into account it didn't come out in Europe until February of 1999, and by this point in time, this game looks severely dated. There had been many better looking RPGs, better looking games in general by that point in time. And it's probably one of the reasons why it didn't sell particularly well over here in the PAL region. And it's also quite a rare game now too. In terms of special effects and how impressive they are, I certainly haven't seen anything that's particularly impressive within my first hour or so in the game. And I just feel overall visually, it doesn't really do anything particularly well. It's not terrible, but it does look relatively basic. I will highlight the fact though that the game does cut to different camera angles when certain events take place. This does add a little bit to the game, and it's actually an advantage when you go for a fully three-dimensional game rather than a game that focuses on 2D backdrops or indeed is just a completely flat 2D RPG. In terms of the performance of the game, I actually think it's quite solid overall. For saying it's one of the first fully 3D RPGs, I think it's got really decent performance. The graphics engine doesn't have any noticeable glitches. It's really solid. There's no texture warping that I've noticed as well. So I feel actually overall it performs really, really well. There is a little bit of slowdown sometimes when you're in dialogue with other characters or when you're moving around, but it's by no means terrible, and I can forgive it just simply because it is one of the earliest 3D RPGs of all time. Loading times are pretty decent. They've definitely not been an issue with my time playing through the game so far. So I feel overall, in terms of its performance, it's actually pretty good too. So moving on to the sound effects and music next, and with the game being a late 90s RPG, my expectations for the sound and music were of course very, very high, but thankfully, so far at least anyway, they've been pretty much matched because the game has got some really nice appealing tunes. It's got fully voiced video sequences too, and this is good because it adds a level of depth to the characters. When you can put a voice to a character's face, I think that always adds something to a game, and thankfully the Granstream Saga certainly delivers thus far in that regard as well. So of course what I'm going to do is what I always do, give you some examples of the music that I've experienced so far within the game. Now moving on to the gameplay next, and if you've watched all of the footage of the video so far, you'll have noticed there's hardly been any battle action whatsoever, and that's because within the first hour and a half of playing the game, I've hardly had any fights whatsoever. So in terms of the way it plays in battle, I can't really say a whole lot. You move your character side to side, you can move forwards and backwards, you can block the enemy's attacks, you can attack yourself with the X button, and you can cast magic spells with the square. It's quite simplistic, it's quite easy to play and learn, but in terms of anything else in regards to combat, there isn't anything I can say, simply because I've not experienced any more than this. Now in terms of the actual navigation controls, it's very much rooted within that of 2D RPGs of the previous era. You can move up, down, left, right and diagonally. The game doesn't support the analog controller, even though that was already out at this point in time, so it does feel somewhat mechanical and somewhat old in that regard. It doesn't play terribly, it doesn't play bad whatsoever, it's just got a somewhat old and clunky feel to it. Now if you're like me and you've played many RPGs RPGs, you'll easily be able to adapt to this. But if you're playing this game after playing a lot of newer RPGs and not many older ones, you may find it a bit of a struggle to go back and play an RPG like this. Obviously, in regards to everything else, you go through towns, you navigate your way to different shops and locations, you can buy items, buy weapons, that kind of stuff. All of that is your standard RPG affair, and in that regard, certainly so far at least anyway, I think the game plays fine. So moving on to content and lifespan, and this is actually very difficult to talk about based on what I've experienced so far. I couldn't really tell you anything at all about spells, weapons, abilities, anything like that, because you really don't experience a whole lot of that within the first chunk of the game. Now, I do know there are 4 different locations in the world that you need to explore to eventually try and save the worlds from falling into the sea, and I have looked it up, and it will take around about 20 hours to play through from what I've read. So it's not actually a very long PlayStation 1 RPG in that regard. A lot of the games on the system are actually quite a fair bit longer than this. So in that regard, I think it's probably quite a good RPG. If you want to play through one for about a week or so, it will probably fit that criteria quite well. So like always, that leaves me with my 2 final questions. Is the Granstream Saga a game that I'm going to come back to and play more of and potentially complete? And what final grade am I going to give it? Now, I feel I need to invest at least 5 hours or so into this game to have a better understanding of what it has to offer in terms of combat, in terms of weapon upgrades, learning abilities, all that kind of stuff, because you just don't really experience any of that within the first hour and a half of the game. It is very story driven. There's a lot of interaction and storyline sequences and a fair amount of video sequences too, to tie the beginning of the game together. So it's one of these RPGs where you've got to invest a bit of time to start with just to get an idea of whether it's going to be a game that you're going to enjoy. In terms of a final grade, again, this is difficult because it doesn't really do anything impressive or anything to sort of draw you in, I feel, right from the get-go. It's not got any spectacular visual effects. It doesn't thrust you straight into the action like Final Fantasy VII. I feel it's a slow burner and potentially will get more interesting as you go along. So in terms of a final grade, I'm going to give it a C. I feel it looks okay for the time. I feel it plays okay. I feel it's got some pretty decent musical tracks like so many RPGs back then. So I don't really feel I can give it anything above a C, just based on the fact it doesn't necessarily have any of these amazing first impression qualities. But I do feel it will be a game that I genuinely invest more time into to see whether I want to play it through to the end. Now, of course, these are just my thoughts and my thoughts alone, and like always with my first impressions videos, they're based on the first 90 minutes or so of gameplay, so it can be difficult at times to get a real grasp on the games that I play. Now, the Granstream Saga didn't actually get tremendously good scores when it came out. It was seen as a pretty mediocre run-of-the-mill RPG, but of course I will invest more time myself and try and figure out whether I agree with these or indeed whether I think it's actually better than this. So of course, let me know your thoughts down below on the Granstream Saga. Did you get it when it came out? Have you played it through from start to finish? Let me know your thoughts, and like always, I'll be back in the near future with another first impressions video. Goodbye for now.
Huh? Oh, what's that? Maybe it's an abandoned Imperial wizardry fortress.
Welcome. Ye who possess the 4 magic orbs hold the key to Erlin.
Erlin?